Hello and welcome. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell, and thank you so much for joining me at my channel. Today I'm going to explore the most important event of the whole year, the solar return for year 2023. This is going to give us an impression, the map of that event, which can shape what we can expect in the following 12 months collectively. I'm also going to go back to year 2020 briefly and 22 just to share what those years informed us. First about COVID in 20 and at the start of 22 about the financial crunch, because both those are shown in those solar return charts. But if you're new to my channel, I'd be honoured if you would subscribe. I've had 29 million views on YouTube. But if you've yet to join me, please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for your time again. So the solar return occurs at exactly midnight on the 1st of January, so midnight AM. Now my chart for this event is based on Universal Central Time, Greenwich. Now I've also produced the chart for this event in terms of equal house, and I've done that for year 2020 and year 2022 as well. If you would like to understand what this year holds for you as an individual, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place of birth, I can give you your 12-month forecast, which will be produced from the moment you order it for a full 12 months, so say from the 10th of January through to the 10th of January 24. Plus in my special package, your life roadmap. This gives you all sorts of intriguing information to help you make the most of your innate talents, but also avoid some of the strains that have happened in the past. In my special package, you also get 3, your general zodiac forecast written, your Indian forecast and your Chinese forecast. And underneath this video, there is a link for each of the 12 zodiac sign forecasts that I've done for year 2023. Now, these are very in-depth. They're broken down into 12 months, so you can go through each of the months of the year. Keep revisiting YouTube if you want to watch them again. They've had lots of views already. They were released in late August. I entitled them the Ultimate 2023 Forecast because that's what they are. There's 12 months in each one, very detailed. This is not a 10-minute skim over in order to get a few views or subs on YouTube. This is a profound investment of time to help guide you in your future months ahead for this year. So let's just quickly go through those year 2020 and 22 charts, just so I can give you an indication of how the solar return works. So in year 2020, the moon was exactly conjunct or side by side with Neptune. Neptune is the planet which is very much to do with healing, but it's also a very spiritual influence, but it also can be very deceptive. It's hard to get a firm idea of what anything is about with Neptune in the mix. It distorts, and next to the moon it can confuse, and both are in the 6th house of practical energy and organization. But also Chiron, the wounded healer, the comet, which is very much to do with where we will see challenges, is also in the 6th house. It's in a different sign, just in Aries. But Chiron is forging a right angle to 2 planets that are very much to do with travel, Mercury and Jupiter, and they're in the 3rd house. So that's a desire to move about freely, and they're also in a very positive angle to Uranus, which in Taurus is giving us encouragement to be free-spirited. The problem is that the square between Mercury and Jupiter and Chiron is much more challenging because it's suggesting people moving around as they wished with no particular structures in place to deal with the pandemic meant it spread very quickly. So we had a very nebulous, hard to understand situation. There wasn't a lot of clear factual support. People could say it was moving so quickly. I feel that the British government particularly could have handled the situation so much better. But the key also is that Saturn and Pluto are side by side in Capricorn. Now, they're in the fourth house of home and emotion, and we know that we all experienced a lot of time at home. Saturn restriction in the fourth house in that following year, and that was a strategy that was imposed, Pluto, by power, Capricorn. So that all fits together pretty well. Also, Pluto can be what's kept secret, the underworld, that leverage that's not always obvious. So we had big government energy in very much in the mix on this particular pandemic. I think most of us believe that pandemic started in a lab. That's not anything against any particular country or race or creed of people. That's just what I think a lot of people believe. And there was a cover-up, and there still is a cover-up. So we had the distortion of the moon and Neptune, the potential for illness through Chiron in the sixth house, the free moving energy of Mercury and Jupiter, which is ordinarily great for deals, in a terrific link with Uranus. So if we can be free, that works great. But that freedom just spread the virus hugely, very quickly. So also I should say that every time that Jupiter and Saturn are in Capricorn together, we will always get a contraction. And that's absolutely a fact. So astrologers saw this come in, and it's not something that's been made up with hindsight. Now let's look at year 2022. Now the big takeouts here is that Saturn in the sign of Aquarius, the collective, is in a square with Uranus, the modern ruler of Aquarius, Saturn being the traditional ruler, but that square is almost exact. So Uranus is in a sign it doesn't enjoy being in the sign of Taurus. It's in full in this location, the second house of everyday money, and how everyday money, or the volatility around everyday money, is affected by the restrictive energies of Saturn, which affects us all. Now, of course, there was that stellar lineup of Mars, Uranus and the North Node, all in May in the sign of Taurus, and the true North Node moved into Taurus on the 18th of January 2022, and I predicted in the autumn of 21 we would have a big financial crisis this year, which has been really emphasised by the total lunar eclipse of the 8th of November, which is tremendously volatile, and it's still really taken us into this new year. But the other aspect to take out, or the other influence to take out of year 2022's solar return, is that the moon and Mars were conjunct in Sagittarius. If you tuned into my year 2022 solar return, I said at the time that was extremely volatile, because the sign of Sagittarius is very much about international affairs. Mars can be war, the moon is emotion, third house can be neighbours, and true enough, you know, the world's greatest provocateur, Mr. Putin, decided that he was going to roll his tanks over the border into neighbouring Ukraine. But that particular conjunction between the moon and Mars was made even more volatile because it was in a tense 150-degree angle, a quincunx, with Uranus. So Uranus can be to do with land, because Uranus in Taurus, the last time that we had Uranus in Taurus was from 1935 onwards, and that was when we had the Second World War. So we've had a repeat of that energy, people grabbing land. But the volatility of the moon conjunct Mars, very, very intense. We've also had, remember, a lot of polarization of people's opinions has got stronger. People don't know how to have a discussion these days. It's just opinions. And Sagittarius, of course, is higher knowledge. The third house is the instant delivery without necessarily thinking about it so carefully, with Mars and Uranus in the mix. So a very volatile mix and a very retracting combination when it came to finances. So that brings us to this year. So what can we expect? Year 2023. Well, of course, Mercury is now in retrograde. So as we go into this new year, Mercury is informing us that we've got to rethink some of our approach to anything that's earthy. So whether it's commodities, fuel, our professional situation. You know, we're living in such a fast changing world. Technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, they're here to stay. Some astrologers talk about Pluto going into Aquarius. It's for 11 weeks in 2023 as the beginning of some kind of brave new dawn. It can be in some ways because I think it's seeing more people power come to the fore. Pluto, for example, is just very, very close to China's moon. And of course, Pluto can be about death. And we have got an issue with people being much more outspoken in China. So that's going to be an interesting one this year. I feel that there will be much higher fatalities than they're able to cover up. But going back to this year, Mercury retrograde is asking us to rethink our approach to all those material considerations. But it is in a beautiful sextile with Neptune in its home zone of Pisces, asking us to embrace the more spiritual dimension, not to be dominated by the desire for big houses, big cars, big money, and there's nothing wrong with having nice things in life. It's about getting a better balance, and that balance is informed in some ways on this solar return by the position of the North Node, which is in a beautiful link with the Sun. So it's saying if we can think about how we can use resources more sensibly, then that's something to really go for in the following year. Now, the other thing I need to tell you about, and this is so important, is the midpoint for this year's event is actually at 6 degrees 43 minutes in the sign of Pisces. So once more, urging us to be mindful of healing, natural approaches, and trying to refine our lives from inside out, not just in terms of what we can surround ourselves with. But this particular midpoint is conjunct the fixed star Sada Lachbia, and this actually can see something that we'd forgotten about be rediscovered. Now that may be something collectively that we can all discover, or it may be something that we personally will discover, but it can be very fortunate. So that's a lovely fixed star to take us into this new year. It's influenced by Venus and Mercury, so very uplifting. But what about Venus? Venus is in an exact conjunction with Pluto. It takes a little bit longer on the 1st of January to go absolutely exact, but Venus conjunct Pluto suggests that relationships are going to be vitally important to how we handle finance, how we handle business, how we handle property matters. So I feel that we are going to discover in this next year the worth of people in our lives, but it may not be the people we think it's going to be. So, you know, the other thing that can happen with Venus in a conjunction with Pluto is something can be offered. It could be something that seems very tempting and alluring. The charm of Venus, through both its rulership of Taurus and Libra, in conjunction with the power of Pluto, in a romantic context, there's going to be some fated relationships this year. But we need to make sure that we understand our own motives and also the motives of the person who in some way or another seems absolutely wonderful, larger than life. It's possible a deal could be offered to some people in the next year. But again, it's understanding what the leverage is, because Venus is the charm and Pluto is the power. So that's something that needs to be watched out for in a very big way. However, that midpoint, despite it being lucky, is in a square with Mars, which obviously as we come into this new year is still in retrograde through to the 12th of January. And in terms of the chart, the event chart, it's in the 9th house. And so that's very much to do with discovery, travel, the sharing of ideas, of course. So there could be some frustration, or some of our desire to travel could be limited again. So what's happening in China could spill out into the wider world in terms of a newer wave of COVID. I think we just have to be realistic that it's still out there. Many of us have had it, I've had it, and we're learning to dust ourselves down and go again. You know, it's something we have to kind of live with. But I hope what this has shown you is how the influence of the solar return is so vital to the events that unfold in the following year. So I think in terms of the reality of life for many of us, in terms of our earnings, in terms of our available expenditure, in terms of our costs, in terms of our professional situation, change is definitely in the mix. And the more that we can connect to one another in a more spiritual way, the better it is. But the great news about this new year is that Saturn and Uranus, I always use within 3 degrees because I think it's much more accurate for these kind of forecasts. So they are within touching distance, about 7 degrees in a square, but it's nowhere near going to be as bad as last year. And this year is also going to see a lot of energy pouring in to the sign of Aries. We've got 2 lunations in Aries, one in March, one in April. The second is also conjunct Jupiter in the sign of Aries. And the North Node returns to Aries for the first time in 17 years on the 12th of July. So that's a lot of new energy coming through. Jupiter, of course, will be in Aries through to the 16th of May. So that's really exciting. And then it moves into the sign of Taurus. So I do feel that we're going to see an improvement to the financial strains that we've all been experiencing from the late spring, early summer, and then on the 14th of October 2023 we have an amazing Libran solar eclipse which is conjunct with Mercury, which of course Mercury in the sign of Libra is very much about fairness, trying to get a better sense of social justice. So this year that's coming to a close has been a lot to do with war, poverty, higher cost of living, everyone feeling very stretched, pressed. It's really not been an easy year at all. But I think this new year is asking us to continue to adapt to a new reality, which is less based on the material world, more based on how we feel about things and how we connect with one another. I'm wishing you all the best for this new year. If you would like to understand what this year holds for you as an individual, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place of birth, I can give you your 12-month forecast, which will be produced from the moment you order it for a full 12 months, so say from the 10th of January through to the 10th of January 24. Plus in my special package, your life roadmap. This gives you all sorts of intriguing information to help you make the most of your innate talents, but also avoid some of the strains that have happened in the past. In my special package, you also get 3, your general zodiac forecast written, your Indian forecast and your Chinese forecast. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure being with you, and goodbye for now.